There's going to be a lot of people debating on whether or not this movie's good, but if there's one thing that this movie did right, it's that TJ Miller's not in it. Deadpool and Wolverine is directed by Sean Levy and is the third Deadpool movie. This time we see the return of Hugh Jackman as Wolverine as the two go on an epic multiversal journey to save Deadpool's world. I have very complicated feelings on the Deadpool movies. I thought the first one was pretty good, and the second one I just didn't really care for that much. But as Deadpool and Wolverine slowly started approaching and we started learning more and more about this movie, I found myself more interested as time went on. It was really interesting. This is the first time in a while that I've actually been sort of excited for a Marvel movie. So going into this movie, I wasn't really going in with super high expectations, but I wasn't going in expecting to hate the movie either. I was expecting to get a really just fun action summer blockbuster movie, and that's sort of what I got. A lot of my opinions on this movie sort of hinge on spoilers, so there will be a very brief spoiler section, but don't worry, most of this review is going to be spoiler free. You don't have to worry about that at all. This is the return of Hugh Jackman, which is something that not a lot of people thought was going to happen, especially after a send-off like Logan, and that was something that I was worried about, was sort of the legacy of Hugh Jackman being not necessarily tainted, but sort of mistreated in a way. But this movie very quickly makes you comfortable with the return of Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. I think that's the word I would use. That being said, seeing the two of them side by side, it was supernatural. Hugh Jackman sort of goes right back into his role as Wolverine very naturally, and it just seemed like he was made for the role. And I'm not even somebody that really enjoyed Hugh Jackman's Wolverine that much, but when he is given proper material, he shines. And this movie does give him proper material most of the time, and that's something I'll get into later on. Deadpool's not a character that particularly appeals to me in the comics or even in the movies, but Ryan Reynolds brings a really good levity to the character and is just, like I said with Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, it just feels natural. But they find a balance with the character that just made it easier for me to watch because he wasn't spewing out one-liners every 5 seconds. Don't get me wrong, he's still throwing out one-liners, but there's a maturity to the character, especially with the way that the plot sort of progresses, that allows Ryan Reynolds to sort of be sort of more human in this, if that makes any sense. The story is something that I think is going to divide a lot of people. Looking at reviews, it sort of already has. I'm of the opinion that the story was pretty good, but there are major issues with it that I just can't really ignore. Sort of to talk about some things that I didn't really like with the movie, I think the biggest thing for me was the pacing. This movie moves at a breakneck pace, and it's odd because it's not really a short movie, and usually with superhero movies, my main criticism is that you could cut a good amount of the movie out. But with Deadpool and Wolverine, I feel like this movie could have been longer. There's a lot of moments that really needed time to breathe. There are certain characters that are introduced that leave as quickly as they're introduced. It just leaves the movie feeling a little bit half-baked at some points. One thing that stood out to me was the third act. I just didn't find it all that engaging, to be honest. I thought that the movie sort of almost fell apart at the seams there. But it's really strange because I was really enjoying the ride to the third act. Once you enter the third phase, it sort of grinds to a halt, and all the personal stakes that were sort of in the movie kind of vanish, and the third act just doesn't really hold up. I think that there's a lot that could have been improved with the third act, and that's something that I'll talk about in the spoiler section. But for the most part, I thought the story was really fun. From the very beginning, it hooks you in, and there's a level of comfortability. The word I'm using a lot in this review is comfortable, and that's sort of the perfect word for this movie. This is one that I think I would go back and watch, which is strange for me to say because I'm somebody that just didn't really enjoy the Deadpool movies that much. But this is one that I found a lot of enjoyment in. As far as the references go in the movie, I mean, there's a lot of cameos. There's a lot to spoil with this movie. For the most part, I think that this finds that balance of nostalgia and story. But like I said, there are some things that happen that just feel a little bit half-baked and I would have liked to see more of. It's a really complicated feeling that I don't really know how to put into words, and I think that if you haven't seen the movie yet, once you see it, you'll understand how I'm feeling. If you've already seen it, comment below what you think, because it was a really complicated feeling. One of the big highlights of the movie for me was the action. I think it's the thing I enjoyed the most. The action in this is really fun, and that's something that has always been a staple of the Deadpool movies for me. More so than the comedy, the actual action set pieces in the Deadpool movies always I found super entertaining, and Sean Levy definitely has the sauce to do these sort of outrageous and outlandish set pieces. I think that from the very beginning you get an action scene and it just blows you away. They found a lot of creative ways to use Deadpool and Wolverine's power sets, and that was something that just really was a treat to watch as a viewer, was seeing how Sean Levy was going to have these two characters interact, not only dialogue-wise, but action-wise. Hugh Jackman's return, I kind of touched on, was justified, and I think that he is definitely the emotional heart of the movie. This is a different version of Wolverine that allows Hugh Jackman to sort of be the most fun version, if that makes sense. He gets to obviously wear the suit. That's sort of one of the big marketing things of this movie. He's finally wearing the yellow suit, and it does look great. Hugh Jackman sort of gets to do the things that the Fox movies didn't let him do because they thought it was too silly. And Hugh Jackman makes it feel just totally natural. His story is one that I found really engaging, and every time that we got sort of bits and pieces of his backstory, I was sort of hooked back into the story. And that's not to say Deadpool's side of the story wasn't great either. I think that his was pretty engaging too. I think he had a justifiable story and one that I latched onto. And it's one that I think a lot of people are going to relate to. Deadpool is one of those super bombastic characters that if you don't write him properly, it's going to be hard to relate to him. But this movie, like I said, finds that balance. Another sort of detractor for this movie was the villain, Cassandra Nova. I thought she was really cool. She had a nice presence, but she was sort of forgettable. I don't think a lot of people are going to be talking about her. Like, it's sort of how I feel about the story. It's just sort of, it's a vessel to get the story moving, but that's about it. So overall, before I get into spoilers, I do want to drop my score. Deadpool and Wolverine was a very fun ride that had its flaws, but I think it was able to hold itself together and sort of deliver a really fun movie that I think you definitely should watch in theaters. There's a lot of cool cameos in this movie. There's a lot of nostalgia going into it. If you are a Marvel fan, you're going to get a lot out of this. This is a love letter to the 20th Century Fox era of Marvel, and it's a treat to watch. On screen, I was sort of like, oh wow, I didn't think I would ever see this ever again, but it was really dope. If I had to give this movie just a score sort of on itself, I think a 7 is too low, but I think an 8 is a little bit too high in my opinion. So I think a 7.5 is sort of where I would go with this. It's going to be interesting to see how my take on this movie sort of ages, because with this sort of movie that has a lot of cameos and has a lot of fan service, how you think about it later on is a really important factor. And so that's something that I can't really comment on because it just came out and I just got out of the theater. I'm going to go ahead and get into spoilers. So if you don't want to get spoiled, here's your warning now. I'm going to get into it in 3, 2, 1. There are a lot of Fox characters that come back sort of at the midway point of the movie, one of which in the trailer being revealed was X-23. You also get to see the return of Jennifer Garner's Elektra. You get to see Wesley Snipes come back as Blade, and my personal favorite was Channing Tatum as Gambit. I didn't think we would ever get that, but I sort of bet the house that we would get him in this movie. If there were any movie for that to happen, it would be this one, so I was really glad to see him. And yeah, I mean, they're really cool for the like 5 minutes that they're in the movie. Not necessarily that we didn't get a ton of them, but that they just didn't have a lot of time to breathe. They're used for gags, and that makes sense because it's a Deadpool movie. But I would have liked to see sort of the No Way Home approach, where the movie sort of grinded to a halt, but justifiably so, to allow these characters to explain the situations that they're in, just sort of be actual characters. I would have liked to see sort of more of a focus on the characters rather than the cameos, and that was sort of like my big thing. I thought the cameos, there was just the right amount. I thought that they totally justified themselves, and I was really happy with all of them. But like I said, I sort of wish they got to be characters rather than gags. I wish that they were a little bit more naturally implemented into the story and naturally exited from the story. That being said, the interactions between them, when we do see them, are really cool. You know, you're never going to see anything like that ever again, I don't think. Not until like Secret Wars, but it was really cool. So, what did you think of Deadpool and Wolverine? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Let me know what you thought down below. I can't wait to see all the discourse around this movie. There's going to be a lot of people that like it and a lot of people that don't, but that's sort of my favorite kind of movie. One where I can see a lot of different perspectives, because that's what film is all about, right? Is seeing different voices. I'll see you guys in the next review. Thank you guys for watching.